Hey, everybody. Thanks for coming to the Data Colada seminar series. I'm Leif Nelson, and it's my pleasure to introduce today's speaker, Silvia Saccardo. In addition, we are joined by a set of outstanding panelists, including her co-author on today's paper, Heng-Chen Dai, Mina Zheng, Christina Gravert, Devin Pope, and Stefan Meyer. In addition, as always, we have here Joe Simmons and Yuri Simonson, and all of us will be participating in today's presentation by Silvia. For all of you, if you want to submit any questions or comments or anything, you'll see the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. And that will be seen by all of us and eventually by Silvia at the end of the talk. But otherwise, just listen and hopefully everything goes just perfectly. Silvia, the floor is yours.
Awesome. Can you see my screen? All right. So thank you very much, everyone. Thank you for being here. So today I am very excited to present work that is joined and co-led with Heng-Chen Dai, who is also here, and Daniel Kremens, and a big team from UCLA Health, who are our collaboration partner organization that collaborated with us in this project. And then we talk about the impact and limits of nudges, discussing some evidence from our own RCT as well as from other research. So just to start with my motivation, behavioral science and experimental methods have the potential to inform policy. We have all seen like very promising, many cases of success in using behavioral science and experimental method to inform policy in a variety of areas, going from financial decision making, health related decisions, energy consumption, and a variety of other areas. And indeed, a lot of, given these early successes of behavioral science, a lot of governments and organizations have started to incorporate behavioral science. Indeed, this map shows it's not very updated, it's from 2018, but shows a variety of nudge units around the world, right? In governments, nonprofits, and so on. And so right now, behavioral science and experimental methods, because usually that's the gold standard for evaluating interventions, have been incorporated, and they do have the potential to inform policy. However, when for policymakers, deciding what interventions to choose for scaling up is actually very challenging. First of all, nowadays, the social sciences, including applied behavioral sciences, going through sort of a credibility crisis given to replication crisis and questionable research practices and so on. Apart from that, though, even without those, there have been many examples of interventions that are deemed effective in one context or in one initial evaluation, and that have been subsequently replicated, producing either null effects or substantially smaller effects. There is a recent work by Stefano Della Vigna and Elizabeth Linos that also finds that the average effect size of nudges in randomized controlled trials conducted by government agency, at scale, is substantially smaller than the effect size of nudges in RCTs conducted by academics in academic research, right? So taken together, discrepancies in intervention effectiveness across evaluations, and all of these discrepancies that I just discussed might undermine the credibility of behavioral science, right? And of experimental research in general in the eye of policymakers. And so thinking about kind of reconciling discrepancy or thinking about what are the factors that contribute to those discrepancies is quite important in our opinion. And obviously there are many reasons for discrepancies. You can start from, again, questionable research practices. This is not something we will discuss in this talk. We have experts here on that. But apart, even when those are not an issue, right, there could be implementation differences, right, that lead to different effect size across different evaluations or different, replications of interventions. Also differences in how the impact of a given intervention is assessed, and I will speak to this a little bit later. Also differences in the target population, right? In characteristics of the target population where an intervention is first tested and then maybe replicated in a population with different characteristics. And so understanding like a little bit better some of these factors, understanding what contributes to these discrepancies is important for informing both like, for understanding really the impact of intervention and also for informing efforts to scale up intervention and inform policy. So in this talk, I will present results from our own research, from our own field experiment that we conducted in the domain of promoting COVID-19 vaccination. I will share some lessons from our field experiments, and these lessons, I will share lessons about factors that contribute to differences in the effectiveness of interventions across contexts. And so in sharing the results of these RCTs, I will tell you a little bit what we learned from these and how can that inform this debate and inform potential effort to scale up interventions in the future. So now I'll dive in our research and tell you a little bit more about what we have done in this past year. So this work was run in the domain of COVID, right? So whenever like the pandemic started, like obviously like there was a lot of effort in developing vaccines, and now then vaccines came, and how do we get people to actually take up COVID-19 vaccination? We thought behavioral science can really help in this domain. Indeed, there have been like a lot of examples of success in the domain, for example, of influenza vaccination in the past, in terms of like applying behavioral insights to increase uptake of vaccinations. And so Encheng and I collaborated with a large healthcare provider to test some strategies to increase vaccination uptake. Now, we are not the only team who did that. Indeed, when COVID started, a lot of teams of researchers and policymakers started to think about how can we best persuade people to get vaccinated, and many have tested them using, looking at intentions or running randomized controlled trials. And indeed, even within COVID, the domain of COVID-19 vaccinations, there are some discrepancies in intervention effectiveness. So, for example, behavioral informed reminders, which is also what we will focus on today, have been shown to improve COVID-19 related behavior in some evaluations, but not in others, right? Sometimes, like some evaluations have found positive effects and other evaluations have not found positive effects. Similarly, offering monetary incentives have been shown to increase COVID-19 vaccinations in some studies, like Stefan and Devin here have a beautiful paper where they do find encouraging effect of offering offering monetary incentive in promoting vaccination. But then there are also other studies, like in California, that unfortunately did not find like encouraging effect of offering monetary incentives. So in general, like because there are discrepancies, it's important to think about what contributes to those. And now I'll dive in like what we did and then like go back to speak to these discrepancies. So, okay, our research. So we conducted 2 sequential randomized controlled trials between February and April 2021 in the context, again, of promoting COVID-19 vaccination. And in particular, we designed these randomized controlled trials to test the effectiveness of text-based reminders, like reminders are a popular nudge, right? In order to increase vaccination. We collaborated with a large healthcare provider in California, UCLA Health, that has like clinics around like California, and enrolled in the studies patients 18 years old or like older who became eligible to get vaccinated during our trials. So as soon as they became eligible to get vaccinated, like patients of UCLA Health were enrolled in our trials. And then now I'll tell you a little bit more about the timeline of our sequential RCTs. Immediately after becoming eligible to get vaccinated at UCLA Health, patients in our sample received an initial invitation. They received an invitation saying you're now eligible to get vaccinated. schedule your appointment, and so on. And then one day after receiving this initial notification, patients who had not scheduled a vaccination appointment in that day at UCLA Health, or according to the UCLA Health record, had not obtained a COVID-19 vaccine elsewhere, were enrolled in our first RCT. The first RCT had, in the end, over 187,000 patients, and was run between February 1st until April 12th in 2021, because patients were enrolled in the study in batches, depending on availability of vaccination and also eligibility in California. Early on, it was only high-risk patients, and then like more people became eligible. Okay, then 8 days later, so 9 days after the first initial invitation, patients who had not scheduled a vaccination appointment at UCLA Health, or had not obtained, again, the vaccine elsewhere, according to UCLA Health records, were enrolled in the second RCT. And in both RCTs, people were randomized to receive a reminder. So in the first RCT, patients enrolled were randomized to receive a reminder to get vaccinated. And then 9 days later, patients who had not scheduled a vaccination appointment were again randomized to the second RCT, where again, they were randomized to receive a reminder or not. Now, some of you might have seen a paper of us earlier this summer. So we published, we followed our pre-registration, both studies were pre-registered on clinical trials, and reported early results on patients enrolled in the trials up to February 22nd. We did that to quickly write up a paper. As soon as we accessed data, we wrote up a paper and put it up to inform, we posted on SSRN just to inform like vaccination efforts. But then we also pre-registered that we will evaluate the full trial at the end. And what I will present today is the complete evaluation, where we also look at secondary outcome measure over a longer time period, and at our additional pre-registered moderators. Okay, so just a little bit more, if there are no questions, a little bit more on the design of our RCTs. So in both of our RCTs, patients who were enrolled were randomized either to an hold-out arm, where they did not receive any reminder after the initial notification, or what we call a follow-through reminder arm. And in this reminder arm, patients were randomized to receive a reminder, right? Received a reminder at 3 p.m. one day after initial eligibility in the first RCT, or 9 days after initial eligibility in the second RCT. We structured this reminder keeping in mind, like, you know, behavioral science, right? And thinking about like what could get people to actually obtain the vaccine. So our goals were to make COVID-19 vaccination really salient and top of mind, to make sure people wouldn't forget or procrastinate. And more importantly, we wanted to make it very easy for people to get vaccinated. And so what we did is, in every text message, we included a direct link to the appointment scheduling website in order to reduce inconvenience, right? Like research has shown that if we want people to engage in a given behavior, even well-intended individual might not actually complete the last mile, the last step, and actually follow through on their intentions. And so we wanted to reduce inconvenience as much as possible in order to encourage people to actually get vaccinated. And so our text messages looked like these. So they said UCLA Health, and then they directed the patient with their first name. So first name, like Leif, you can get the COVID-19 vaccine at UCLA Health. Make a vaccination appointment here. And then they included the direct link. People could click. This will link, direct them immediately to the appointment scheduling system, where they could book a vaccination appointment and hopefully then get vaccinated. So within each RCT, we had some sub-arms that also varied a little bit the language in the text message. I will get to that at the end. Just as a, well, and whenever I discuss the result, if you have questions about the sub-arm, I can let you know, but for now, I'll just describe them at the end. Okay, so overview of our talk. What are the main insights that I want to share with you today? So first of all, I want to show you, ask the question, how does the estimated efficacy of our reminders vary across outcome measures? Second, how does the efficacy of reminders vary with different baseline motivation to get vaccinated? And finally, I want to share these results as well about how hypothetical responses match behavior in the field. And so taken together, these questions can speak a little bit to when we assess impact, when we try to predict what will scale up, maybe we want to take into account all of these three things that I will get to in a second. Okay, so just to start, question one. How do our reminders affect vaccinations across different outcome measures? So our pre-registered primary outcome variables were appointments at UCLA Health within 6 days from getting the reminder. And so basically I have some details in the slides. It's from 3 p.m. after getting the reminder until midnight, the 5th day following the reminder. Okay, so that's our main, we just look at whether people scheduled an appointment within 6 days. And then second, we look at are people actually getting vaccinated, right? So vaccinations within 4 weeks. We picked 4 weeks initially in the pre-registration just because we didn't know how long it will take for people to actually being able to get an appointment. So we were like, okay, within 4 weeks, it seems like it's arbitrary how we picked it, but that's what we pre-register. So within 4 weeks, whether people get vaccinated at UCLA Health. And we also pre-registered that we will look in all of our analysis. We will look at regression estimated increases in either appointments or vaccinations according to, depending on the outcome measure, right? While controlling to a variety of demographic controls. So age, gender, ethnicity, preferred language, because some people got the message in Spanish. Some people, if they were in the system, patients that had their preferred language as Spanish. Some social vulnerability index, that's scores that UCLA Health uses to classify patients, COVID risk scores, and then fixed effects of invitation dates. Now I will show you also the raw data for the beginning, but then later on I will just use the regression estimated increases in either appointments or vaccinations when I show you the results. Any questions so far? You've been quiet. Yuri.
So, I have a quick question.
Of course.
This is a classic econ question. What happens if they get vaccinated elsewhere?
That's you're jumping ahead. Yeah, I will get that. I will get to that in a second. So for now, our primary thing, we're at UCLA primary outcome measures. We're looking at UCLA Health. We also pre-registered some secondary outcome measures that can look at vaccinations outside of UCLA Health to get an overall estimate of impact. And I will share in a couple of slides how do those look.
Hi, Silvia. Just one quick clarifying question. Does the second RCT, are those the same people that were in the first RCT that didn't sign up, or is it new, fresh people too?
No, it's the same people. So those were 2 sequential. So it's again the same people who did not get vaccinated after getting a reminder if they were in the reminder arm.
Nice,
right?
Thanks.
Yeah. So you can think those as more hesitant people, right? Because they weren't signing up. They didn't sign up, at least after an initial invitation and after the first reminder, if they got it.
Nice.
Okay. So, of course, Mina, go ahead.
Yeah, so I was wondering, these people in the sample, like 100,000 more people, are they active? So do they opt in to get text message from the hospital, or are these the people who haven't in the hospital or made an appointment past 3 years or something, or is just everyone in the system?
It's a combination of both, right? So it is patients of UCLA Health, either primary patients or specialty patients, and who have who opted in to receive text messages, I guess. Enchan, can you jump in on this? It's everybody, right?
Yeah, it's everyone who has the SMS enabled phone number on record. They don't have to actively sign up to receive a text message, but at least they have never said, I don't want to receive text message.
Thank you. All right.
Silvia,
yeah, of course.
you know, so there is like people who get an appointment right away are not in the sample now.
People get
within a day.
They're not in the sample. Yeah.
How many are those to see like what is, you know, are they selected, you know, because I think it's important later for you, like that, you know, how active, whether they want to, how many are already out of the sample because they
already got vaccinated. Yeah, so
they get I mean, I certainly did right away. Whenever I could, like within a couple of seconds.
Yeah, and that's a very good point. I don't know the answer to this right now. I can definitely check it in the data later, or enter, maybe you can check it right now. I don't know. Because we were like, okay, we exclude anybody who has gotten vaccinated by the reminder. I didn't even think to look at, but wait, it's definitely something that we can get and can let you know. The idea was like, obviously there are people who don't need it, like who don't need anything, right? They might just like, they're very eager to get vaccinated. And so those might have gotten it even outside of UCLA Health before getting this notification, because like the eligibility at UCLA Health was a little bit different from the eligibility in California, because UCLA, like California, let's say high-risk patients started in January, right? But UCLA Health needed to have like enough doses. And so maybe people who are eligible in January maybe got an invitation in February 1st, for example, to get vaccinated at UCLA Health. So the people like you maybe like were already vaccinated even before, because they found a different place to get vaccinated. Does this make sense, Stefan?
Yeah, because it's a relatively, I was a little surprised how little, you know, that how few people in the control are actually vaccinated. Mm-hmm. So I was wondering whether that's just because,
it's a more hesitant,
you know, only 20% or whatever the number is, like really got vaccinated, or those who wanted to get vaccinated are already out of the sample.
Yeah, so it depends on what outcome measure you looked at. Like if you looked at vaccination at UCLA Health versus like overall in California, it's different. I think in our old out arm, it's about 31% of patients who got vaccinated within 4 weeks of getting the reminder. And this is like in California, so not even at UCLA Health. So I don't know how that compares. I think it's comparable to what we saw in California at that time. So I don't think it's particularly selected sample, but yeah. Okay. All right, so now next I will show you some results. So I will show you the effect of the first reminder. So this is the effect of the first reminder on appointments within 6 days at UCLA Health. So we see that like it's 5% of patients get an appointment within a day of, within 6 days if they are in the old out arm, whereas like this goes to 10% of patients in the follow-through reminder arm. So like the reminder actually like increases appointments, and our regression estimates that the increase when we control for like all the controls that I listed earlier, it's 4.4 percentage points. This is the increase in vaccinations at UCLA Health. So what we see is that about 10% of patients got vaccinated in the old out arm, they got vaccinated at UCLA Health, and 13.44% in the follow-through reminder. Our regression estimated increase is 2.8 percentage points. So basically the conclusion from this is yes, right? Like the reminders are effective, they do increase appointments and they increase vaccinations at UCLA Health. Now I will show you the results for the second reminder. The second reminder,
Silvia?
Oh yeah, of course.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Why are the coefficients changing so much with the controls? Like,
I mean,
they shouldn't, right? They shouldn't change.
Yeah. So I mean, it's a lot of controls that we have, right? A lot of demographics and so on. And yeah, this is indeed, because we pre-register, not even like checking, like looking at, you know, just the raw data without controls. We haven't really digged into that, but that's a good question. Enchen, do you have a sense of why they changed so much?
Not really. I'm also double checking. I think the number is accurate. So just to make sure it's not typo, it's accurate in the match what I currently have. I'm just looking at the raw data and regression estimate, but we will look into that. Thanks for pointing it out, Yuri.
Yeah.
We did do the randomization check to make sure the random assignment itself is successful. And there might be still some slight imbalance we're controlling for now.
Yeah. Okay. This is the effect of the second reminder. So overall, as I kind of previewed earlier, again, these are people who did not get vaccinated after they were already eligible. They got the notification of eligibility at UCLA Health. They got some people in this, they got the first reminder. And then, so it's a more hesitant sample overall, but yet when these people are randomized to receive a reminder, right, there is still a small benefit of actually getting the second reminder, right? And so I think there is an increase in 1.1 percentage points in appointments and 0.8 percentage points in vaccination. So very small effect, but still an effect.
Silvia, can I ask something?
Of course.
About the, maybe a little bit about the mechanism. So what do you think the reminders do? So because if we think about, right, this Hook and Rasool old theory on reminders, right, they talk about transaction costs, and then people have different transaction costs at different times. And then, yeah, I mean, that makes a bit the difference. And so if you get another reminder and then you have lower costs, then you sign up. So, I mean, that could be more the standard, okay, I forgot about it, then remind it again, and it's easy to do. Or is it more this, well, getting sent another reminder makes me feel like I should be doing this, right? So, or maybe it changes something. I mean, you don't really give that much information, if I understand correctly, but does it change something about the preferences or my understanding of the social norm? I don't know if you can say something about that to the content you have. Maybe what were you thinking in the beginning? Because here, I mean, also with these effect sizes later on, the differences staying kind of similar but smaller might speak more for this attention story. That is just like, well, I mean, you get the reminder now and then I forgot, and then you get it again, and then you do it, and just once in this, the ones who don't get the messages are just a little bit less likely then to remember to do it.
Of course. So thanks for asking, Christina. So we designed the reminders with the idea, okay, we are not trying to, I mean, persuade the hesitant with this. I mean, we might, right? But like really the reminder was designed with the idea of like, let's try to make it very convenient and very salient for people, right? That they can get vaccinated easily by can schedule an appointment by clicking on this link. So you're asking about what happens with the second reminder. Why are some people, I mean, some idea could be like they just missed the first, right? And then when they get the second, they get prompted to actually get vaccinated. Yeah, apart, so it could be like an attention story. It could be that they didn't see the link before and now they see the link. We did have the second, especially the second RCT had like subarms that tried to use different phrasing, like self-focus, social focus, like get vaccinated for yourself versus for the community, things like that. Those things did not have, like all the reminders have similar effect, especially in the second RCT. So they didn't matter much for this second reminder. So it's more salient to them, more convenient maybe, because now they see the link and they apart from that, I don't have more to give you on this because
Sure.
Okay, so our next question is to look at these effect size across outcome measures. So now I changed the type of graph, but it's the same result here. So this graph shows the regression estimated percentage point increase in appointments and vaccination rates. Oh, sorry, well, this will be just, yes. Appointments and vaccination rates in the first and second RCT. So first reminder, second reminder. So those are the 4.4 increase and the 2.7 or 2.8 increase that we saw in the previous slide, right? And now I will show you, like, for our secondary variables that that can help us assess like impact over a longer time period, and also using different measures, looking at like not only UCLA Health, but everywhere in California. So if we look at people getting vaccinated at UCLA Health within 8 weeks, then we see that the impact here, first reminder and second reminder, it's comparable, right? Which will be like, wow, like one text message like increases behavior, like changes behavior, and that's long-lasting effect, like up to 8 weeks from the date of getting the reminder, we still see that there is a benefit. However, there is one limitation of the UCLA Health outcome variable, which is what Yuri already mentioned, which is like, what if people didn't get vaccinated at UCLA Health, but got vaccinated at a pharmacy or CVS or wherever, like, other clinics that were not UCLA Health. Stefan, do you have a question?
Yeah, if people make an appointment in and schedule it 8 weeks out, how does that? So they get the text message and make an appointment. How does that show up here?
This is not, they schedule it 8 weeks out. It's more like we look at their vaccination records of people enrolled out and treatment after 2 months, basically after 8 weeks, and just see like, so regardless of when they're vaccinated, is there still a difference between old out and treatment, right? So,
but it could be they get the second reminder and schedule something for 8 weeks.
It could, yeah, it could be. It could be, but generally, like UCLA Health opened appointments, like kind of like not 4 months, like not 2 months out, but like closer. So, but yeah, we could look at, we have the dates. We could look at when exactly. Yeah, we do see, well, it's a preview, but we do see that overall the reminders accelerate vaccinations. So like people who get the reminder, they get vaccinated much quicker than people who don't get the reminder. But yeah, so that's all I remember, like from, but I can look more into the dates and so on. Okay, so for UCLA Health, we see this effect, right? But as I was saying, like people could get vaccinated at, maybe get the reminder and go get vaccinated at a pharmacy, or even without the reminder, they might not think of getting vaccinated at UCLA Health because it's more convenient to go elsewhere. And this outcome measure just doesn't capture this behavior, right? And in order to assess like impact, we wanted to see like, are we actually really increasing vaccination? It could be that we're just shifting behavior, right? People who will get the vaccine at a pharmacy now are, because they get the reminder, they might get the vaccine at UCLA Health. And so we accessed administrative records from the California Immunization Registry, and are able now to, for each patient in our sample, to look at their vaccination regardless of where they got vaccinated, if they got vaccinated at CVS versus UCLA Health, like all together. And when we do that, this is the estimated impact of our reminders. So basically what we see here is that the estimated impact of our reminders is almost 3 times as large when we focus on UCLA Health than when we focus on vaccinations anywhere in California. And so this suggests that, yes, we are still a significant impact. It's 1 percentage point increase, but it's smaller, right? Suggesting that what we were estimating at UCLA Health, it's a combination of increasing vaccination, but also shifting people from getting vaccinated at a pharmacy to getting vaccinated at UCLA Health.
So, Silvia?
Yep.
Can I ask, this is going to be an incredibly naive question, but how up to date and how accurate is the vaccine registry in California? And like, are there typos that would spontaneously look like no one got vaccinated or something like that? I'm just curious.
That's a great question. It was really hard for us to access that data. We accessed it at the end of August. So August 25th, that's the date, Chang, maybe you can correct me. And so it could be that, so it was like months. So we started in February, so and ended in April, right? So people had months to update. We don't know, we have no idea like, well, like if it's 100% accurate or is still missing some vaccinations that occurred, like that, we don't know. But initially, like we were open to get access to this more quickly, but UCLA Health was like, no, it's delayed in terms of like when people enter and report this vaccination. So we got access to it later in the summer.
Hi, Silvia.
Yeah, of course.
Do you mind if I ask, so there's nothing necessarily special about percentage point changes, right? So I could have had a prior that these reminders had a percentage effect on whatever outcome. And surely the base rate of vaccination in California is higher than vaccinated at UCLA. And so my guess is the percentage effect is maybe pretty similar. So do you have a sense for how, like, why is it that I should be worried that the effect size is different in percentage point terms, but maybe it looks the same in percentage terms?
Right. So yeah, you think, okay, that's a very good point. So you think we should look at the percentage effect, or at least report both, right? Look at both. We haven't, but we can definitely, right? Yeah, that's a very good point. I think it's a great point actually. So we should look at it. We haven't done it yet. Okay. Finally, if we look at the 8 weeks, this is even more starking, because if we only had access to this, we would have concluded like there is no impact. And if we only had access to this, like we would have concluded, yes, there is an impact up to 8 weeks after the reminder. And for the second reminder, it's like the trend is similar, though to begin with, the effects are much smaller. So just like to sum up, yeah, of course.
So can you go back one? So do you think that that's because it's the reminder, or because there is an appointment link to it? Which, do I interpret that correctly? So that in California, because there is a link, I'm more likely to go to UCLA Health.
It's possible, yeah, because we nudge people to go to UCLA Health, right? We make it easy for them to go to UCLA Health. And so we see that, yeah, vaccinations at UCLA Health increase, but this comes from like a mix of, it's not that overall, like if we are policymakers and care just of overall vaccinations, right? Yes, we are still increasing a bit overall vaccinations, but we're also like getting more people to one location as opposed to another. So to sum, basically what we find in this section, in these results, is that yes, reminders do increase vaccinations up to 4 weeks, but their effect size, at least the percentage point effect size, like we will look at the percentage later, depends on whether effectiveness is measured using like more immediate behavior, right? The appointments within 6 days have the largest effects, versus like obviously later it goes away. And also like when we look at more comprehensive outcome measures, like UCLA Health versus California seems to have like different patterns, or not patterns, just different effect sizes. And so these results kind of like motivated us to think a little bit more about like how are, like when we compare interventions like in the literature, how are those measured, right? How is effectiveness measured? And so we became curious and accessed data from 2 review papers that report nudge RCT, results from nudge RCTs. And in particular, those papers are a paper by De La Vigne and Linus for coming in Econometrica that look at the percentage points that affects differences in like effect size, like between like nudge RCTs conducted by academics as opposed to nudge RCTs conducted by government agencies like nudge units. And then we also look at another paper in OBHDP by John Bashir and Kodowski that reviews data from, reviews recent RCT or like papers that use nudges, right? And we were just curious, like, does the average effect size of nudges really kind of like is associated with characteristics of these outcome measures that are used to evaluate effectiveness? And so what we did is the following. We focus on field experiments that measure take up. So like in vaccination, like just using binary outcome measure. This is all of the papers reviewed in De La Vigne and Linus. And then like the subset from the other paper that just focuses on binary outcome measure. And we look at the effect size by looking at the difference between the take up in treatment, between take up in control in the different interventions in all of those papers. And so there are like 230 interventions in total. We have like 40 RCTs from academic papers and 45 RCTs from a government nudge unit, the Office of Evaluation Studies. That paper has trials from 2 nudge units, but only the Office of Evaluation Sciences had a comprehensive description of those trials so that we could go in and code the outcome measures used in those RCTs. So that's our kind of sample that we look at. And basically what we do, we have a coder that codes whether impact in a particular RCT is assessed with more comprehensive measure, similar to vaccination in California. So it's basically administrative records that capture all of the channels through which people could engage in a given behavior, versus more localized outcome measures, similar to UCLA Health, that could leave out channels. Maybe people are still engaging in the behavior, maybe the nudge makes people engage in the behavior, but just through different channels that it's not captured. What we also code is whether impact is assessed in the short term, and as opposed to in the long term, what we did in the in our study, imaging appointments in 6 days as opposed to 2 months or 1 month. I won't have time to dig in, it's in the paper in our supplements, but I just want to share some main findings from this analysis. So we have 2 main findings. So across all of the 85 RCTs that we look at, the average percentage point effect size, right, of nudges assessed with more localized outcome measure as opposed to comprehensive, right, is 5.8% larger than nudges assessed with more comprehensive outcome measures. We also see that average effect size of nudges that are measuring the short term within a week of the intervention, it doesn't matter if we do it continuously, it's similar, but within a week from the intervention is 9.8 percentage point larger, suggesting that indeed, when the outcome measure used to assess impact are of those kind, the impact is estimated to be larger. Yes, Yuri.
So are you thinking of this as a substitution effect or as a measurement error issue?
So we were thinking a bit more of it as a substitution effect, in the sense that some outcome measures just cannot capture whether people get, engage in the behavior. Could be vaccination. There are some vaccination studies in this sample as well, at a particular clinic where they're nudged to do it versus they get it elsewhere. But I'm open to think about different ways to think about it. This is super.
I'm going back to Leif's question. I would imagine that UCLA has an easier time keeping a cleanup database than California. And so once you go to California,
it could be that
coefficients will be biased down
because of the measurement error. Yeah,
right.
It could be. So ideally, we will access it again in 6 months just to validate, make sure that any correction that happened, but we don't have it. Yeah, we can think more about that. It's true. It could be measurement error as well. Some of oh, go ahead.
So I think that's definitely a possibility, but I'm also wondering if we think about nudging, right, really conceptually, isn't it about, correcting for a bias, correcting for some kind of, right, if we think about this fast and slow decision making, right? So then a lot of the idea about the nudges is this very short term overcoming some either inattention or some salience effect or something like this. So in that way, I think it's nice with these findings, but I guess, should we be surprised that they don't have these types of long-term effects? Because I would assume that the idea of a nudge is right, that it should have also I think in your paper, it should have an effect on making the appointment right now and then having an appointment in 4 weeks. But I would also, I'm not sure if we could go that far saying that the reminder nudge causes the vaccination 4 weeks later, but the reminder nudge causes you to get an appointment so that, or maybe, right, maybe even if you write it down in your diary. So it's maybe not that you go to UCLA Health to the website and put it there. So in that way, I'm thinking, also, I was thinking about, you talk a little bit in paper about scalability and these things, but if we want to get people, let's say, to eat more vegetarian food, if we give them one nudge one time because we put the vegetarian food on top of the menu, right, why would I expect that, except if my preferences change to that behavior, to have those long-term effects, because I mean the attention is going to be gone a week later. So
obviously the long-term I'm fully with you. I'm just thinking like, yeah, completely, right? However, there are differences, like there are people like trials that just use the equivalent of our California measure and conclude like there is no effect. Or there are other trials that, oh, they measure impact 8 weeks later and then there is no effect, as opposed to like, oh, then we don't replicate, right? Or so I think for policymakers, it's also important to think like how, when I'm trying to synthesize the literature and understand what is effective, right? I think just the point that we want to make is just, it's important to also consider how impact is assessed. I agree with you that nudges should, like we're nudging people to get appointments, they are getting appointments. Are we actually increasing vaccinations overall? Like that's the ultimate goal. Yes, though it seems like the effect is small, basically, if we just look at the California.
But
measure.
Maybe then we would want to say it's not about, I mean, nudging these later outcomes, so maybe actually more saying to policy. So I think maybe it's less about the assessment, but it's more about the, well, maybe we should only be in a way nudging these direct decisions, right? So I think nudging as much as a policy instrument should be something that has an effect right now. I mean, getting you to, I don't know, remember to pay your tax or something that it is more of a short-term behavior. And then if you want it to be long-term, then you have to, in a way, re-nudge people. But I think unless we're changing preferences or beliefs or something through the nudge, then I don't think we should be expecting this long effect. So maybe more going that way around and saying, okay, I agree with you, that's like this in the papers, but maybe saying, well, nudges are maybe more suitable for this very like signing up for something or very short-term things, get out the vote on the same day and not 2 weeks prior.
Later. Of course, and that's in my conclusion, but thank you for previewing it.
Silvia, can I follow up on that? Sorry. Yeah, I was thinking about like what reminders are really supposed to do. And like in this case, in the COVID-19 case, it does seem like they're not supposed to switch anti-vaxxers to being vaxxed, because it's not a persuasive attempt, right? It's just trying to get people who are inclined to vaccination to actually get the vaccination. But it's just trying to remind them to do it. But in the COVID-19 setting, reminders are everywhere. So like if you don't respond to this reminder, there will be a million other reminders, like your friends are getting vaccinated, there's rules about being vaccinated. Like it seems like in the COVID-19 case, like the very best case scenario is that you don't actually change in the long term who gets vaccinated. You just change how quickly they get vaccinated, which is important. But if you instead looked at other contexts like flu vaccines, there's a case where people do forget. And it's not like there are constant reminders to get flu vaccines from your friends, from the government, from the news. And so like in those kinds of settings, I'm wondering if, obviously, like you don't have time to walk through like all 85 RCTs, but I wonder if you could look at some kind of moderator in these kind of reminder nudges to see if like, okay, is this a context where people are getting reminders? They're probably getting other reminders in the real world. If so, I would expect the effects to really drop off in the from short term to long term. But if they're not, I would expect a one-time reminder to, in the long term, increase the percentage of people who get flu vaccinations because they're not being reminded downstream. Anyway,
that's a very good point. Yeah, no, and I agree with you. So I think it's something that we could look at in these 85 RCTs that we are analyzing. Yeah, thank you very much for your comments. I'm gonna speed up because I see I don't have much time and I wanted to share like a couple of more results with you. One, it's about the comparison between RCTs run by academic versus government nudge unit, because of this recent paper, right, that compares like and find like academics have substantially larger effect sizes than nudge units. So when we look at these outcome variables, well, academic papers are also much more likely, for good reasons, because maybe they don't have the access to administrative data, right? But like more likely to use localized outcome measure, more likely to use like short-term outcome measure to evaluate impact. And indeed, this difference contributes to explain the result documented by De La Vigna and Linus that academic papers have substantially larger effect sizes on average. Indeed, I'll go quickly, but like this regression just shows that the effect size on average of academic paper is 7.9 percentage point larger than the effect size of nudge units, which is a 1%, like 1 percentage point. But if we control for whether like the outcome measure is localized or short-term, then the difference is still significant. So it's not that fully explains, but it becomes smaller. Suggested that indeed, like part of the difference, it's like, of course, we publication bias and other factors, differences in characteristics of the nudges, but also how this impact is measured kind of contributes to this estimated difference in effect sizes. So just to like my takeaway from this section, I wanted to quickly get to the other section, is that both in our RCT and in RCTs in the literature, it seems that the impact, at least the percentage point impact, differs depending on characteristics of the outcome measure used to measure, to assess impact. And so, you know, when we think about how to, what we want to scale up, what behavior we want to change, as Christina was saying, like we might also want to think like, okay, if we really want to ultimately increase vaccinations, let's say, then we need really to think about, okay, how was impact assessed in this particular evaluation? Was it assessed using administrative data or just the initial, you know, just one organization just looking at like, you know, expression of interest, click through as opposed to actual vaccination and so on. Just keeping an eye on what outcome measures are chosen could be important. This concludes my first lesson. If there is time, I want to quickly get to the second, which is among whom are reminders most impactful. And this touches upon like what Joe had mentioned a little bit, like, you know, there are hesitant people, they might not respond to your reminders. Indeed, we designed the reminders just with the idea of, you know, pushing those people who had already some intentions in place and just made it easier for them to get vaccinated. Indeed, like nudges, like when we think about nudges, one size does not fit all. And there is now a push in the behavioral science literature to start thinking about heterogeneity, right? When we think about nudges, not focusing just on average treatment effects, but also trying to think about differences in characteristics of the target population of interest. And so even our reminder effectively increased vaccination in a case in which like the vaccination rate it was done earlier on in the vaccination rollout, first of all, so probably people weren't getting so many reminders, but second, overall, like we see that our sample had some intent to get vaccinated, like the overall vaccination rate at 4 weeks in the holdout arm was 31%. There was later on an attempt by a different team to use reminders to increase vaccination, very similar reminders to ours, and they found no effect. And one thing we noticed is that the overall vaccination rate in their holdout sample was just 2%. So this was a much more hesitant sample. And so this led us to the question, like, are reminders more effective for patients with higher baseline motivation to get vaccinated? And to study this, we first used some unique features of our setting. So because people became eligible in California at different points in times, and as I said, they were invited in batches to UCLA Health. And the randomization occurred at the batch level. And so just because we have different batches, we have batches with higher overall vaccination rate in the holdout condition, and batches that were overall more hesitant, so as indicated by the holdout vaccination rate in our condition. And so using the holdout vaccination rate as a proxy for some sort of like average baseline motivation to get vaccinated in that particular batch, we look at the correlation between these and the effect size of our reminders. And so this is just a correlation, but I'll show you this graph. Basically, the y-axis here looks at vaccination rate anywhere in the holdout arm of the different batches. Each circle is one of the different batches, and the circle size represents the size of the batch. And the y-axis as the percentage point effect, right? Difference in vaccination rates at UCLA Health in this case. Basically, all this graph shows is that the effect size of reminders was smaller for batches that were more hesitant, and it was larger for batches that overall had higher vaccination rates in holdout. The interaction all-out vaccination rate time reminder is significant in both trials, suggesting that indeed the effect size of reminders were just more effective in batches with higher overall vaccination rates in all-out to begin with, which we take as a potentially a proxy for baseline motivation. Now, this analysis was not pre-registered, it's just a correlation that we show that was motivated by that paper, but we did have 2 pre-registered moderators for proxies of baseline motivation to get vaccinated. So one is prior flu vaccination, because it has been shown in the literature that prior flu vaccination history is predictive of COVID vaccination intention. The other one is political leaning, because it has been shown that Democrats are more likely to have a higher intention to get vaccinated. And so we look at these proxies in our data. We look at whether patients obtain a flu vaccine in one of 2 recent seasons as pre-registered. And we look at, we access county level voting data and match them with the zip code of where our patients live. And we look at whether patients lived in a county that voted in favor of the Democratic or Republican presidential candidate in the 2020 presidential elections. And we use both as our moderators. So we look at the effect size of our reminders by flu status and by political leaning. Now we do it for all the outcome measure, but just for the sake of time, I'll just show you for this for the UCLA Health. So what we see is that the effect size of reminders is larger in the for people who had obtained a flu vaccine, as opposed to people who had not obtained a flu vaccine in previous seasons. And it is larger, actually, it's positive, it's not even like significant for people who lived in counties that had supported the Democratic county in the 2020 election, as opposed to the Republican candidate in the 2020 election. The trend is the same for the second reminder. And so overall, what we showed from this analysis is also that we need to think about whom we are matching, right? Like the reminders have substantially larger effect among patients with higher baseline motivation to get vaccinated, as shown by our different analyses. And so this finding as well could help reconcile differences in intervention effectiveness and could have implications as well when we think about scalability. The rabbit hole paper that I just discussed was run in a hesitant sample, and reminders did not have an effect. It also used administrative data to actually measure vaccinations, so like the least sensitive outcome measure among the one I showed you. And so whenever we think about what scales up, why are there discrepancies? I'll just jump to my conclusion slide and skip our third lesson for the sake of time. We basically should think about really, A, how impact is measured, as again, it's important to think about outcome measure, and B, we should think about characteristics of the population, right? In particular, in our case, baseline motivation to get vaccinated really affected whether people were responsive or not to our reminders, or not effective, but like moderates whether people are affected, responsive or not to our reminders. And so again, when we think about scaling up, we need to think about matching thinking about in which population a study was run, and like, let's try to potentially match it to the, in thinking about whether an intervention could be effective, we should think about like, does the target population matches like the population used in this particular evaluation. And with this, I'll end. I want to thank Encheng and Daniel, my co-authors, and the entire UCLA Health team, and everybody here who asked very nice questions and gave feedback on this new project. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Silvia, and thanks to all of our panelists for being here today. Really interesting work and a fun discussion all around. And thanks to our audience for being here as well. The seminar series will take a few weeks off for the holidays, but we'll hopefully be back sometime in the spring. So enjoy your holidays in the new year. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.